Hi, I am Sebastian. I will give you a simple explanation about how the Bitcoin payment network works. Well, the first thing that you need to understand is that in the same way as a traditional system works, Bitcoins, pesos, euros, dollars are nothing more than a unit of account. They are information. Money is a special kind of information. Money is financial information. Okay, it's nothing more than information. And when people send money to another person, what's happening is that numbers are being updated in a database. The difference between the traditional banking system and Bitcoin are the rules that govern how this information gets updated. So that's the first thing that you have to understand. If you don't believe me about money being information, you should do a little bit of research about fractional reserve banking, central banks, inflation, and a little bit how finance works. So, the first thing that you need to understand is that Bitcoin is a database with the equivalent to account numbers are addresses. And addresses have a balance Bitcoins. And this database is distributed among all the participants in the network. Now, when somebody sends money from one address to another address, what's really happening is that that entity is digitally signing a transaction instructing money being moved from the address under its control to the address that is the recipient of the account of the money. Now, the way somebody proves they own the balance in an account is by the process of signing a transaction with the private keys associated to that account, to that address. So the key technology here you should learn about is public key cryptography. That's the basis of it. Now, the transaction gets propagated through the network on a best effort basis. All the nodes that participate in the network just will relay the transactions, and these transactions obviously need to be stored in a database, and that database is called the blockchain. The blockchain is a history of all the transactions that have happened, moving money from one address to another address. So the way you compute the balance of an address is following a long chain of ownership and transmission of value between address to address. That's the way it's computed. So the thing is that this database is not held by a central trusted authority that enforces the rules through which money is introduced to the system or accounts updated. So in the usual setting, central banks, fractional reserve banking, and so on, the ones that operate this ledger are banks. They have control over this information. In the case of Bitcoin, there is nobody in charge. The information is maintained by all participating miners. So what are miners and how is information updated and what is a blockchain? As I said, the blockchain is a record of all the transactions that have happened in the network, from which you can derive the balances in each address. And the reason why the blockchain exists and the process of mining exists is to enforce a ordering of the transactions. It is very important to know in which order transactions have occurred. It is fundamental for everyone participating on the network to reach an agreement, or as we call it, consensus, about how transactions have happened, in what order they have happened. Why? Because if you cannot know the order with which transactions have happened, you cannot know the balances of the accounts. It will be very easy for somebody to double spend money, right? What is a double spend? It's when somebody has certain value in an address and they sign a transaction twice, paying more than two addresses using the same money and effectively spending more than they have. So what a person attempting a double spend will do is try to propagate two transactions. One, paying the recipient that he wants to try to mock into believing he's gonna make the payment, and another one paying himself, for example. And the fraudster will try to make believe his victim that he's paying him just enough time for him to get the goods or services and escape, for example, right? So the network has to be able to know the order in which transactions happen. So if a transaction already used the bitcoins in an address, and a second transaction then happens spending the same bitcoins, that transaction can be discarded. So that's essentially the reason why a process called mining exists. It's a process that helps us reach a consensus about the order with which transactions have happened in the network. So you want to know how the Bitcoin mining process works, I suppose. Okay. Every determined fixed amount of time, a new page to the ledger is added. A new set of transactions is added to this distributed database called blockchain. But how do we know which is the next page? How is a valid block accepted by the network? A valid block, valid set of transactions, needs to have associated the result, the answer, to a cryptographic puzzle that is a function of the transactions that it englobes. This cryptographic puzzle has a very well-defined statistical property: the time it takes to resolve it. is known, the time on average it takes to resolve it, it is known beforehand. And the system will adjust its complexity. So given the resources that the network has at a given moment of time, contributed by all the miners that are racing to reach a solution to this puzzle, the time it will take to reach the solution will be fixed on average. So, and it also has a cryptographic computational property that once we have the solution, it takes milliseconds to verify. Well, it takes very small time to verify that's the correct solution. But to find the solution takes a lot of computational power and therefore energy and resources and money, of course. So miners are working on this problem all at the same time. And just the first one to reach that solution will get its mined block included in the blockchain. So you might be wondering, why in the world will miners spend energy, money, resources in order to perform this task, to secure the network, to ensure there are no double spends, to ensure the data is correct? Well, the miners that include a new block to the ledger have the advantage of being able to pay themselves a reward, which is an amount fixed by the protocol rules, and that's the reward they have for performing this task. So maybe you don't understand yet why this process helps prevent double spends. Well, the reason it does so is because it will be economically and computationally infeasible for an attacker to manipulate the history of transactions in the Bitcoin network, because it will have to compete with the entire network in order to be able to manipulate data to its advantage in an unfair way. So I was talking to you about how money is nothing more than information, okay? And I am sure somebody out there is thinking, no, I know money is not information because I have a piece of paper on my wallet. You're saying that money is just numbers in databases. No, I have here I have a banknote here. Well, yeah, sure, you do. I agree with you. But it's a piece of paper with numbers that just represent financial information. It's a different kind of medium to store that information. You know, you have magnetic mediums, you have paper. That's it. Okay? But somebody will say, no, but I know that the money is represents deposits of gold and silver and platinum in vaults in the banks. Again, that's wrong. I'm sorry to contradict you. You should go and learn more about how the system works. That's a myth completely. It's something that has not been used in a long time. And somebody will tell you, well, but I know that the money in bank accounts is to represent it. Yeah, okay, might be numbers, but banks need to have a reserve of cash, paper cash in their vaults. Yes, well, it's true that they need to have reserves, but they are a fraction of all the monetary volume in circulation. The amount of cash that exists in paper form, tangible paper notes, it's between 1 and 2% of the entire monetary supply. The rest is numbers. It's numbers in databases. So let's focus on the rules. That's what differentiates the blockchain approach to the central banking and fractional reserve banking approach of money creation. Okay, so in the traditional financial world, how money is introduced to the system is through several processes. One of them, of course, is public debt, like the government lends money from the central banks. The central bank, or the Federal Reserve in the case of the United States, gives them a check, which is an IOU based, which is not backed up by anything. It's just numbers, and that bond, that IOU, the treasury or the government can trade it in commercial banks for cash. Okay, and then commercial banks can go to the central bank or the Federal Reserve or whatever, depending on your jurisdiction, and trade those bonds for cash, basically. Okay, and when that happens, well, the owners of the printing presses can print money, which is the central banks. So that's one way, public debt, which of course, guess what? Creates inflation, surprise. Another aspect of how fiat money is created is the fractional reserve banking system. So imagine someone deposits a certain amount on a commercial bank. The commercial bank will then lend most of it or invest it and just leave a small amount in reserve for the case that somebody might claim their money. Of course, this is possible because there are statistics about the probability with which people will claim their money in the short terms. So banks obviously realize they can leave a very small amount in reserve in relation to the total deposits. But guess what? When somebody gets a loan, then they usually pay somebody else because it's a loan for something they want. And then the people that get paid redeposit the money again. And then that money gets redeposited again and again and again. This creates a huge amount of monetary mass out of very small amounts of cash deposited initially. So that's interesting, isn't it? And the system is, it's efficient. With very small amount of money, it's able to move a lot of wealth, create a lot of debt, create a lot of money. But guess what? This has also a problem because it makes the system extremely fragile in confidence crisis. Anytime a bank has problems with its creditors, there is a huge risk that it will not be able to cover its liabilities. And then if one bank goes down, a chain reaction burning the entire system might be unleashed. So that's why you have, as we can politely call it, federal insurance. which is basically the bailouts. You know, under our current financial system, most banks are not responsible for when they get in trouble because they will be bailed out by the government, for example. And of course they will be, because if they are not bailed out, a confidence crisis burning the entire civilization can be unleashed, right? So it's like this whole thing about being too big to fail, it's a joke. It's like you become too big to fail and then you can be unresponsible, right? Because you will get bailed out. Anyways, it's the problems of fiat currency. I mean, you knew it can be suddenly inflated. It's subject to a lot of uncertainty if there is a confidence crisis. It's subject to inflation. You know, of course, those are disadvantages. But I don't want to make these comments that I'm doing appear like I am presenting a struggle between two worlds that are incompatible. No. Everything has advantages and disadvantages. Okay? Let's move into Bitcoin. So, in the case of Bitcoin, you don't have a monetary policy controlled by governments, central banks, or banking cartels. No, the monetary policy is fixed by mathematics in the protocol. You have a reward, which is fixed and is halved every 4 years, and is given to the miners to perform their crucial task in securing the network. We know exactly what's going to be the amount of circulation at any instant of any day in the future. It's much more predictable. Yeah, it's suboptimal, I acknowledge that, because somebody can show you some results explaining how a monetary policy that is elastic might create growth in an economy. But it's usually not the case. So I would rather predict a I would rather prefer a slightly suboptimal but fixed monetary policy that simulates how precious metals are scarce and increase their value over time. I would rather go for that than a system subject to the breeze in the emotions of politics. So again, I am not trying to create a comparison between, well, I am comparing both systems, but I am not trying to make one appear better than the other. I'm just trying to show you there is now a new asset class that opens new possibilities. Like, you have God's money, you have like precious metals, gold, silver, and so on. Then fiat, which is with its own advantages and disadvantages. You have now another kind of money, cryptocurrency, which opens a whole new world of applications. And it's very interesting to see how these kinds of assets will interact between each other. Actually, I actually my business has to do with creating the interface between fiat and cryptocurrency. I am launching a cryptocurrency exchange called isbit.io, and it's all about, you know, the synergies and the business opportunities and the arbitrage that we can take advantage because of the interaction between of the old system and the new system. So I love understanding how all these parts fit together, and keep an open mind. Many things are gonna change, and many interesting things are happening. So I wish you the best 2016, and may God bless you with a lot of Bitcoin.